Yeah. It almost crashed my iPad, I can tell you that. All right, we're going to get started. It is now past 4:30, and if we can, we'll start with an invocation. I'll ask Councilmember Gregory if he would provide us with an invocation, please.
Oh God, we need some relief. It's hot. But I know you know best. Guide us as we do the work of the people, and help us to understand that we must make the wisest choice that we can make, because it's when we do that we know that we are blessed. So God, please do something about this heat. Amen.
Amen. All right, second item on the agenda is approval of minutes, but we're going to actually, the clerk's office asked if we'll defer both of those items until next meeting, so we'll take up bids and purchases next. Item 3, is there a motion?
Move for approval. Second.
Any discussion? Yes, sir, Councilman Shearley.
I had a question. I guess this is for Amy, but on the Big Belly trash cans, I like them, by the way. I think they're awesome. But I understand that that will not be paid until 2020. Is that correct?
Some of it will be this year, and then some will be in 2020. Okay. So that's why we have enough money in the budget for what we need to pay this year. If that, because it's crossing over years. Okay. That's the problem.
And the remainder will be paid in 2020.
All right, so we'll budget for the rest in 2020.
Thank you.
All right, any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The ayes have it. Item 4 is traffic and transportation approval consulting services for $23,500. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The ayes have it. Item 5 is Office of Cultural Affairs approval for $3,000.
Second.
Grant. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The ayes have it. Item 6, recreation.
Second.
Is a summer feeding program. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Ayes have it. Item 7 is Police Department.
Move for approval.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Ayes have it. Item 8 is Parks and Capital Projects. Approval of Dimitri Park Floating Dock Change Order Number 5. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The ayes have it. Item 9, Stormwater Management Approval. Apply for HMGP grant. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The ayes have it. Item 10, Stormwater Management.
Question.
Yes, Councilman Lewis.
Number 10. You know, we approved the money for this, the Hugh King drainage. At that time we approved it, we didn't approve it for a grant. I know we're working on a grant to have some more money, but I'd like to see this project get off the ground. It's been to meet the process that it went through. It's getting stormy season will be coming up soon. And Hugh and King, and Hugh and Line, you're talking about 2 depth tracks. I don't know where they're at, engineering at on the board of getting this project together, but we really need to start working on that contract. Because when people come up September Clark Expressway, they're going up Ashley Avenue, the water's so deep, they come down Sumter Street. Come down Sumter Street to King, you're going north, go up King and Hugh, you can't get through. They make a U-turn and try to turn around, come south to Line Street, you can't get through. So we need to do something to solve this problem down there on King and Hugh. Give people some relief to get it out of these neighborhoods. So I don't know where engineering is at with this project. Can someone answer that question?
Mr. Fountain? Maybe if you could just address for us outside of the grant application, just where we're at in the process for the
Yes,
project
absolutely.
itself.
So that project has a firm that's been selected by the selection committee, it's JMT, and we're in negotiations right now in the scope for the design work on that project.
Can you give us any time frame when you expect to start to work on that project?
So we're in the design scope right now for the preliminary engineering. We'll likely have a scope at either the next council meeting or the one after that with bringing to council for approval for the design fee. At that point, we move into design and permitting. You know, it's likely going to be a year or so of design and permitting before we can do construction work.
Yeah. I hope that y'all do something to work on that corner before you really work on some of that drainage. A year ago, they started working on drainage. They brought a company in to help them. But they never did come up on that end of the street. Everything stayed downtown. So we need to get some relief and work on some of these pipes and clean it out before the snow season comes. I certainly appreciate it. You'll just take a look at the area and do something.
Absolutely. That area is on our list of the high priority inspection areas where we inspect before every storms and we look to mobilize pumps and things in that location.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any further discussion? Councilman Mitchell?
Yeah, and I concur with that also, because everyone knows that I live right there on that corner, and been there for, now, 35 years, and it was flooding ever since I was there. And we have a school there, which is a Charleston Catholic school, and they have problems when that floodings happen. You should see the way it's backed up, even with kids there. And it's really safety problem there too, with the kids coming, at the school there, with the Catholic church that's there. But more importantly, it's a safety mechanism for everyone, because you should see the cars that have been lost right there on that corner with the flooding and going through the flooding. I had people living behind me on Benson Street that lost their cars right there because they didn't drive and it was there, but the water came up so high and came up so quickly that they didn't get a chance to move it, and they lost their vehicle because of that flood. So this was going on a long time, even back since the 70s. So we need to get some relief and start doing it now and we are going other places. And I understand everyone looking for flooding and looking for relief, but that was going on ever since I was in school. And we need to try to start working on that now. I know that I was on the committee, on the selection committee, but we need to start getting something done now quickly, as soon as possible, and not waiting to get resolved in that particular area. And I think that would help a lot of these areas, even to Meeting Street, if you get the drainage done that way. So I hope that we would just look at that very seriously and start moving swiftly with it.
Mr. Mayor?
Just a comment, and that's why we're moving forward with this project. That's why it's also important to apply for funding wherever we can to help pay for these projects, because every dollar that we garner from a grant in essence saves money in our stormwater fee, so we can go do more projects that we know we need to do. And so I'm very pleased to advise council that just yesterday we were approved for a $500,000 grant for this project by the South Carolina Rural Infrastructure Grant Fund, that we approved that grant application just a few months ago. And if we're successful with additional portion of the expense for the project from this HMGP grant, not only will we get the project done quicker because we'll have funds in place, but we'll also be able to save money for other projects as well.
Further discussion, Councilman Lewis?
I understand what you're saying, Mr. Mayor, but this was approved. The money's supposed to come out of the TIP, and it's in the stormwater budget. I appreciate it. I hope we can get the grant.
Yes, sir.
We get all the money we can get in order to work on flooding in the city. But this project
Is approved.
Public safety project, so we need to do something to get some relief.
Yes, sir.
Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Now, ayes have it. Item 11, stormwater management approval of the Garin Creek mitigation project, change order number 1. Any discussion? Councilor Griffin?
You get a second,
In
yeah?
a second.
We're sorry, did we get a second?
No. Okay, Councilmember Shades, the
Okay.
second.
Could we maybe get an update from maybe Mr. Kirk or somebody on that? Because every time I see a change order for Phase 3 in Spring Fishburne, I cringe.
Me too.
It just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So can you, is this going to be the only time that we're going to see something like this? Or should we be expecting maybe a couple other change orders, more cleaning? And how does this affect the timeline of the project?
So this is the salt marsh mitigation aspect for what's actually Phase 4 of the project, the work going on in Phase 4. It's just being performed in Phase 3 in preparation for that Phase 4 work. Basically, this project was working with the National Forest Service to balance out the material on a facility that floods somewhat during tide, so that it would be fully flooded during tide, deforest the trees on the property, and then return it to a natural salt marsh. What happened basically is they were doing the work on the property. There was a combination of an issue where they couldn't burn material on site because of some Forest Service requirements at the time. And then there was additional material within sort of the furrows on those pine tree furrows for tree plantations that resulted in more material than we expected. So we've actually piled all the material up, quantified the material on site. And this is just the cost to remove that extra material from the site so that it'll flood properly and create salt marsh. So this should be the only change order for this mitigation project.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, ayes have it. Item 12 is public service approval of contract with JLA in the amount of $40,000 to act as city's representative during design and construction of Magnolia PUD.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the ayes have it. Item 13, stormwater management approval of work authorization number 1, with AECom, an amount of $231,250. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the ayes have it. Item 14, stormwater management approval of work number 2 with AECom. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the ayes have it. Item 15, housing community
Move for
development.
approval.
Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the ayes have it. Item 16 is housing community
for approval.
development.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the ayes have it. Item 17 is the Committee on Real Estate, Chairman Moody.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We had a very rigorous real estate committee meeting. I'll just tell the body that all of these items were approved unanimously by the committee, and I'm just going to go down them and maybe say a little bit about each one, and then if anybody's got any questions afterwards, then we can vote on them all as one package. Is that
That sounds good.
all right? I'll make a motion that we approve them at the end. Okay. Item A, that rid of that church for Spoleto was approved. Item B and item C both dealt with some low-lying property of granting some easements and rather than a fee simple, but there's some other stuff that the owners are going to do there. So item C had, there was a easement that was given to a building that was never recorded back when it was done. And so we're kind of cleaning that up and putting that on the record. Item D is the operating agreement and the development of the visitor center to the CVB. We're turning that over. We've already set aside 2.6 in the hospitality fund for that. We're going to do another 2.9 in 2020. And basically, the CVB will take over the Convention and Visitors Bureau. We'll renovate it. There's several things. We had a lengthy discussion over that. It'll be a 10-year lease. And some other parking issues that come along with that too. If anybody's got some questions, we'll try to answer those. Item E is the dissolving that Bridgepoint Owners Association. We approved that. Item F was the intergovernmental agreement between the County of Charleston and the City of Charleston for that property by the library for the lady that, one of the ladies that was killed at the Mother Emanuel Church. Yes, that's all right.
Councilor Gregory.
On behalf of the family, I'd like to say thank you. And Councilmember Mitchell, the Garden District, with Vanjie Rathford as the president, our legal department in particular, our real estate department actually really put a lot of work into this and even represented us at the county. So I think that I would be remiss if I didn't formally thank all the folks that made this happen. I, of course, am thanking the county to have a garden with a 68 Calhoun Street address. To me, Ms. Jackson is worthy of such. In addition, Mr. Mayor, I think some time ago you had put forward the signage, the Susie Jackson Way underneath the street sign. And the family, again, is thankful to you for putting that forward so that they both can be done at the same time. Again, thanks, folks. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Gregory. So that item was approved. Item G was that agreement, that lease, a license agreement between the Ports Authority and the Citadel about some oyster shells, and so that was approved. Item H was the amendment of lease between the city and the Charleston Tennis LLC. We went over that agreement pretty carefully, and didn't we make a couple tweaks to that agreement, modified it a little bit for our counselor to add to the agreement, and the people that were there I think everybody was okay with that. So, but that was approved. The next items I threw in have to do with the 999 Morrison Drive. That's the Charleston Digital Recorder building. The first item, this is to give second reading to that second amendment. Basically what we're going to do there is pay $100,000 a year for 10 years, and we'll receive 850 square feet of office space. We'll get up to 350 parking spaces, and that we're allowing the contractor, or I guess the developer, to use subguard agreement for their bonding rather than having to put up bonds. So we think that's a better way to go. That was I. J was the sublease. We approved that. K, K, L, and M, basically what we're doing there is we're assigning we had an agreement with CDC for the garage and the building and all that, and we're agreeing to let them assign that to the developer that's going to build all that stuff. O is some access, some easement access, and those were approved. P is an agreement for another one of those houses to be sold over in Maryville, Asheville. Those of you that maybe didn't come to that ribbon cutting, those are absolutely spectacular homes. I think this is the fifth one, is it not, Mr. Mayor? The fifth house that we've deeded, or the fourth one, I'm not sure. But we got a couple more, so we'll be seeing those. There's a total of 7. There was one annexation on Woodland Shore Road, that was approved. And item R was a discussion regarding the Richardson property over on Camp Road. And we basically ask our real estate people to secure an appraisal on that. We're looking at that as maybe some affordable housing or whatever, but trying to buy that property is in Mr. Rich's name. So with that, Madam Clerk, I would make the motion that we approve all those items.
Second.
All right, Councilman Griffin?
Just got a couple of questions for you, Mr. Chairman, maybe Mr. Mayor. Item D, the approval of the agreement between the city and the Visitors Bureau. I know that we have started reassigning some of the displaced city employees. What are our plans to continue those efforts? Because I know we've got several employees, city employees that work there, some long tenured employees, and I just want to make sure that all of them will be reassigned and that nobody's going to lose their jobs over this.
That was discussed, if it's okay, Mr. Mayor, you can, but we asked about that. My understanding is that most, if not all of those employees are part-time employees. They're not any full-time that have all the benefits that might occur. There might be some college kids and some other stuff, but they're all part-time employees. Don't get maybe 20, well, less than 30 hours. So they don't have any benefits. And basically what I was told by Ms. Hill was that any of those people that needed a job, wanted a job, there's plenty of room in the hospitality industry to get them a job. So
I thought we had some city employees full-time.
Well, they were being paid, but I don't think they were full-time.
Well, a lot of them are full-time. So right now, 3 of them, there's 11. So 3 of them are placed somewhere else. There's 6 or 5 that are pending placement, and 1 person will be retiring, and the other 2, one of them is looking for a job on her own, has not really asked for help, and the other one we're still working on. So most of them are progressing nicely to find other areas in the city, or they're finding other jobs, or they're deciding to retire. So most of them will be taken care
But
of.
we're working with these individuals to find other jobs.
Yes, we absolutely
Within
are.
the city.
We absolutely are.
And we plan on keeping everybody as best we can.
As best we can.
Okay.
Yes.
Second question was about the 850 square feet of office space. Do we have any sort of intention for that space, or over in the digital corridor? Do we have somebody in mind, or some sort of city employee that would fulfill a role over there? Do you know why we're looking for that office space?
Well, we did have an employee that was going to go there, but that employee is no longer with us. But what we have decided there, we're going to contribute that $100,000 for 10 years, and that's really and that's actually the second 100,000, so don't confuse it. But our efforts over in the digital corridor are the Charleston Digital Corridor has been responsible for our tech industry in this community, and if not for that group, our technology would not be where it is today. So we're going to support that if we have a need for this space. I mean, we would love to let somebody else have it, as an incubator or startup, but we want to have the opportunity to have a presence in that building where it says City of Charleston supporting the tech center.
Any further discussion? All right, sorry, I think Mr. Mayor was on, and then Councilor Seegans.
So, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I mostly just wanted to give a couple of shout-outs. This is probably the longest real estate agenda that we've had since I've become mayor, and it just so happened that the stars aligned, and folks, that's why we were a little late getting up here. It was really appropriately a long meeting because we had a lot of items and very important items to cover, summarized by Chairman Moody. But the staff work that went into all this, coming all together at the same time, was really remarkable. So I want to shout out to our finance, our real estate, our legal folks particularly, and we even brought into Calvary, Colleen Carducci, who left us a few months ago. She was working over the phone from Minnesota, and our former full-time counsel, Francis Cantwell, was working from Folly Beach. So just the effort on staff's part was really amazing. And beyond that, I wanted to shout out to Justin Fiera for bringing back to our attention the need for these real estate agreements for the extension of the low line that had not been completed to date. And they're really important connections for the low line, both coming south to get to Wolf Street and going east to get over to Meeting Street. So that was very important. The agreement with the CVB, Convention and Visitors Bureau, is like a recommitment to the city's visitor center. Will include a renovation of the building that will make it much more usable by the public as well, not just visitors, but also by our local citizens. So a shout out to Helen Hill and the CVB. And then the agreement that we have come to for the Charleston Tennis Center over on Daniel Island is an amazing agreement that will lead to a $10 million investment in that property by the folks that run the facility for us, not city dollars, but that's just an amazing improvement to a city facility for our citizens long term. And then finally, the digital corridor agreement will bring to reality a dream of the city to continue our technology economic development. So boy, there was a lot on the plate. A lot of folks worked really hard to make all those things happen, and I wanted to thank everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank
Councilor
you,
Seekey?
Mr. Chairman. I know we've had a long meeting. I just, on item H, which is the shortest item agenda on there in terms of words, but I know it's a complicated deal. I'm interested in where we are, what the terms of that deal are between the tennis center and the city, and then I've got a couple questions. If someone can just give me a basic outline on where we ended up with that. I have two questions, and I know there's representatives here. I'm not trying to churn up a pot of anything here. I'm going to vote in favor of it, but I just want to know what those terms are, so we all around here know when we're asked what's going on with the tennis center. And then I just have a couple of questions, so.
Mr. Chairman, you want to run through the bullet points?
To do that,
Or Susan, either.
I can try, maybe,
Susan, could you
Susan probably ought to do it, so I don't say the wrong thing, but there's several
Right.
steps to it.
If you have to read, if you have to read
I
all
like
of
the
that.
idea of surmising that with, it always makes me nervous when she pulls that Expando folder out. If you could just maybe give us the bullet points on the agreement with the tennis center.
Sure. Okay. So, got to do this or Vanessa will yell at me again. Remind. So, as I said in real estate, I think the starting point for this is to look at the 2014 agreement that the city entered into. And that was in September of 2014, and the initial term was for 15 years, or until 2029. It's a management agreement, and under the agreement, the tennis center had the right to obviously manage the center exclusively, operate the Volvo tennis event, and conduct other events there. They paid up to $10,000 a year, reasonably necessary structural maintenance, and in exchange, the city paid an annual management fee, which in 2014 was $225,000, but each year it had a 3% escalator, and now the amount is about $260,000. So that's the backdrop. Under the First Amendment, there'll continue to be the $10,000 annual maintenance fee. However, there's a new little provision that says if the $10,000 hasn't been spent in 1 year, it'll roll over to the next year. The tennis center agrees, Charleston's tennis center agrees to spend up to $1 million during the term of the agreement for structural maintenance. And those would be items that are not included as Exhibit B to the document that you all received in your agenda packet. Also, within 3 years, the tennis center agrees to spend at least $9 million in capital improvements. And at the end of those 3 years, or when the improvements are made, whichever is sooner, the city, couple things. The city has a right to impose a $1 per head or per ticket fee for every event, and that $1 would go to a special fund for maintenance at the tennis center. And also, at that point, the management fee that's currently in the agreement would be replaced, and it would be the then current management fee, which 3 years from now would be roughly 285,000 plus 160,000, and each year there would be a 3% escalator added to those two numbers for the term of the agreement, and Amy and Matt have more specifics on the year-by-year obligation of the city as a result of that. The tennis center has to receive city approval of any capital improvements over $200,000. The term will extend for 42 years to 2061. However, the city does have an option of terminating it after 33 years However, at that point, the city would be required to buy out the remainder of the management lease, and the cost of that would be $3.65 million, so 306,650,000. Math was never my strength. I'm sorry. So those are the deal points.
All right.
So,
One other thing there was the $9 million was sort of basically to improve the seating capacity up to about 9,000 people.
right,
And that was, that's a big part of it, so that
and reconfigure it, right? Reconfigure it a little bit, too.
Right.
So my question is sort of more 50,000-foot question. This is a long-term lease, 42 years, is a 33-year buyout period that is optioned by the city, but not by the lessee. Is there a co-provision in there at some point if certain benchmarks are met, or if there's some point of negotiation where the city would actually turn and sell this property to the lessee, rather than have a long-term 42-year lease that's super complicated on a property that we essentially are turning over to a management company that is going to run all the events and do all that? It seems to me, at some point, it's a better deal for the city to just turn around and sell it, put it on the tax scrolls, and be done with it. Is that part of what we're doing?
There's currently no provision in the lease that expressly provides for the tennis center to buy this property from the city. However, there is a general provision that talks about selling the property, and there are obviously some requirements there that says the tennis center has to consent under circumstances to doing that. Obviously, if we're going to be selling it to them, that would not be an issue. But there's nothing specifically in there about selling it to the Charleston Tennis Center.
Let me just say, I'm going to vote in favor of this. It's complicated. I think it's good for the city to turn this over to a professional management company that has experience in doing this. I mean, I know Mr. Moran is staying involved. Mr. Navarro has stepped up his game, and I see some of the representatives here. But I do think this is an example of, here we are in the city, we have an entrepreneurial team that's ready to go and run our center as a business, which we should be always thinking about. And I just not sure what the advantage to the city is long-term of hanging on to ownership, really in name only, and sort of dinking along with these fees rather than at one point turning it over, putting it on the tax scrolls, when we have a lot of other things that we need to be looking at and thinking about. So I'm going to vote in favor of this. I think it's, at some point, we ought to think about, particularly this property, there's some others too, when we've got someone who's got the capacity to purchase outright a facility that is a great public benefit, but we have turned it over to a private company to run it, why it wouldn't be out there in that realm, and we turn our attention to doing some other things rather than hanging on to property. So vote for this. It's complicated. I think a sale would have been the better way to go, and still something we should think about long-term. Thank you.
So I'll take, sorry, Councilman Shade, then I'll make a comment to that. Go ahead. Councilman Shade.
I just wanted to get clarification on, I think Mr. Moody mentioned this, on the $9 million for structural improvement dealing with seating capacity, and that had to be over a three-year period of time. And Ms. Susan, can you just sort of email your presentation, so those bullet points, so we just have that for our records later on down the line?
Certainly.
Thank you.
So let me, if I could, just address quickly Councilmember Seeking's comment regards to selling the facility. One thing I think is important to remember is that facility is not just what is the main stage. The facility is actually, I would guess, the largest concentration of tennis courts, including clay courts, owned by the city in the city of Charleston. Much of which the programming that they do, city residents get discounted city rates for being able to use those courts. And if we were to sell that, we would lose that right. And we would lose every one of those courts as far as being able to provide recreational programming to citizens. Even though the city's recreation department is not managing that process, residents do have access to them, and we would lose that opportunity, and it would become a private organization at that point. And there are plenty of private organizations out there, but I think that we'd be we'd be remiss if we were to go into an idea of selling a facility and getting rid of the opportunity to have that many courts available to the citizens of Charleston at a discounted rate. So that, I just want to remind everybody that there's more to that facility than what concerts and a tournament annually.
And that's a fair point. I mean, there are, that's also a plot of land that's carvable. I mean, you could have the big tennis facility, then you have the tennis courts by it. So I just think it's something to look at. I mean, the big part of that facility is by and large used for big public events. I get it, it's fun to put kids in there and do all sorts of things in the big stadium. The tennis courts are a different issue, but I mean, it seems to me that's subdividable if we were really to think about it. So fair point, you got it.
Councilor Griffin?
I think you both made great points here. I agree with you. I think that at some point we're going to have to look at selling this facility because we're not going to be able to afford for the maintenance at some point. In a city where we're constantly looking for funding sources everywhere and we have to put so much emphasis on flooding, we can't afford big, expensive projects like this one. Eventually, just don't see how we're going to be able to keep up with the maintenance, and I know the company that's running it now is a great organization, and they have such a love for tennis. I have a hard time believing that they would ever not work with the city to allow us to use those facilities. But sustainable, I just don't see how we're going to be able to keep up with it long term, and eventually we're going to have to make a tough decision, I think, as a group, about whether or not we can keep maintaining this facility or whether or not we should turn it into an opportunity for us to put some money elsewhere. Thanks.
And I specifically had requested that the dollar per ticket be added into this agreement for exactly what you just pointed out. Because ultimately, we have to create revenue streams from a fiscal standpoint, because today we don't even have a fiscal policy that mandates maintenance of our facilities. This facility currently has $8 million in deferred maintenance. So I specifically requested we put that dollar in there per ticket. It's at our discretion, but it's likely we will initiate that. But over the term of the contract, this will basically create somewhere, they estimate, around $4.5 million. So is starting to do exactly that, starting to be forward thinking about being able to maintain the assets that we have because it's expensive. Councilman Wagner?
A quick follow-up on that. I knew that there was a large number of deferred maintenance items out there. And so that begs offer, okay, what is the annual maintenance fee for that facility and how bad is it? If it's, you just said the number of $8 million.
Right.
Okay. If we have an asset and we're not taking care of it, maybe we shouldn't have that asset at all. That's my world. That's the accounting world that I live in. And it's going to fall down if we don't take care of it. And so I'm trying to put this together in my little head right now, and my numbers aren't adding up right closely. So help me out with a little bit, Gary.
Yeah, I would. If that theory holds true, we need to sell every parking garage we own.
I agree.
The amount of deferred maintenance and facilities that the city owns is staggering. And today, we don't have a fiscal policy in place that dictates that we maintain our assets to the degree we need to. That's a global issue that needs to be addressed. But I can tell you that when we sat down in the ad hoc committee and we started going through line item by line item the things that need to be addressed and what we were able to actually fund from a city's perspective, we got down to, okay, tell us what the life safety event issue or items are. And those are the things that we had to prioritize. Life safety, that was a priority. That's a problem. And that's a problem that's sitting right in front of us, and this council is going to have to address that at some point in the near future. Councilman Waring?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want y'all to strap on your seatbelts because I'm going to say something that initially you all going to think I'm crazy. Why don't we sell the battery? Why don't we sell the battery? That sounds ridiculous, right? Because it's a wonderful public space for all to enjoy, not just Charlestonians, everybody in America, near and afar from abroad. One thing that makes Charleston unique are the public spaces that we have. Daniel Island is not a private island. It is Charleston for all to enjoy. It took a lot of, as far as maintenance, if we built it, we certainly can maintain it. We haven't. And your issue about $1 added to the ticket, how many other venues, in particular public venues, we can do that with? Easily we can get rid of it, but let me see you get it back. Let me see you replace it. So I understand privatization, but when it comes to public access to various venues in and around the Charleston area that we know we cannot replace, and the moment it gets privatized, the price goes up, in particular for the small people in this community, it's a mistake. So are there some items we could jettison? We could, but that was an economic impact issue for the state of South Carolina. I said it in our committee meeting. When the Family Circle Cup decided to pull out of Hilton Head, the Governor Hodges, the Secretary of State, our CVB, the mayor, everybody jumped quick because we wanted that economic impact to remain in the state of South Carolina. The quick actions behind Mayor Rowley and his team and the CVB, great teamwork, got it put on Daniel Island. We all know what was on Daniel Island when that stadium came. We knew how many people were living there. Indirectly, because of the amenities in and around Daniel Island, it's one of the finest places in America. But you know what? Government invested first. So when it comes to, I was going to stay quiet on this one, but I couldn't stay quiet on this one because something had to be said. The easy thing to do would be to jettison it, but look at the public loss to the public realm, not only the Charlestonians, but everybody we share that with around the world. People literally come from around the world to visit that stadium. So if we could build it, we have the capability. We're cutting ourselves short. We have the ability to maintain that facility. We just need to put together a funding formula for maintenance. Thank you, Mr.
Right.
Chairman.
And I would say not only, it's really not necessarily just the ability, but it's a responsibility. We can't just build things and let them fall apart. You know, we have to build them, we have to maintain them, and they've got to be held up to a standard that we all would be proud of. Nobody wants to walk into a facility that's owned by the City of Charleston and go, I'm a little bit embarrassed that our city's name is on top of this building. We've got to be focused on that. And it goes well beyond the tennis center. So, all right, any further discussion? All right, I think we got a motion already on the floor. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? The ayes have it. Is there any more business coming before this committee? We'll stand adjourned.